Hi, I'm the Queen of Filth, or my name's Dani Brown, whatever you want to call me. And as final story, as part of a Christmas ghost story thing organized by Lex Jones, I have "And All Those Souls in Hell Shall Sing" by Simon Bestwick. So, and obviously I'm recording this is the 30th of December, so I've only got a little Christmas tree and a Mr. Oogie Boogie Christmassy. I would record in my front room like I did the other two at the beginning of December, but it is an absolute mess in there right now, and I'm not cleaning until I put the tree down either Sunday or Monday. So, Merry Christmas! And All the Souls in Hell Shall Sing by Simon Bestwick. And I was doing quite good reading this, and they put in classical composer names, and there's a Christmas carol, which I am totally not singing because I just do not have a singing voice. Trust me on this. You don't want to hear me attempting to sing ever. All the windows showed him was his own reflected face. Let me try that sentence again. I suck at editing, so I'm just going to learn how to edit next year maybe. All the windows showed him was his own reflected face. That and the room behind, 2 cards on the mantelpiece, and the small, barely decorated tree with its scrubby, threadbare tinsel and half a dozen plastic baubles covered in cheap gilt, already almost scratched away, the sole visible concessions to the season. Tucked away behind the pub, the close was a small, still pocket in the busy city's heart. Only 5 houses, but all but his empty tonight. No lights left on to ward off thieves, even. Foolish. Chris could have sworn that Harry and Ella at number 3 had set up some sort of timer to activate the house lights at intervals, but if so, it wasn't working. Chris sipped his coffee. It was cold. He considered enlivening it with a dash of bells, but resisted. The picture would have been too miserable, alone in the silent, cluttered house. No matter. There was a CD player, the DVD, devices to fill the house with sound and light. He was standing over the CD player, trying to choose between Purcell and Monteverdi, when his phone rang, loud in the silence. It made him jump. He fumbled the phone up, squinted at the screen, then answered the call. "Julia," he said. "Chris." Her voice was blurred by washes of static. It sounded like waves breaking on a shingle. "I just wanted to see how you were." "I'm okay." "And to say, you know, the offer still stands. You can still come over, I mean," she said. "The service isn't for another hour. We'd love to see you." We? He didn't even know who we were. Her mother, father, sister, child, or did she have a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife? He'd never been sure, never known how to ask without seeming gauche and clueless. The number of times he blundered into humiliation, embarrassment, he could hear the mocking playground laughter in his ears, even at 30 years removed. The potential friendships he ruined by misleading the signs, the opportunities missed through blindness, timidity, and second-guessing. The carol service tempted him nonetheless. Once he'd have snorted at it as foolishness or superstition, but now it called to him. It brought back memories of Christmas as something other than a festival of consumerism and gluttony. That thought sounded dour and staid, even to him, the voice of some cold gray man who wanted to banish all the season's cheer, but he knew there was truth in it as well, that the Christmas he knew now was as joyless as any zealot's marking of the season. It had once been different, a time of happiness and light. There'd been a beauty and a mystery to it when he'd been a boy, when his parents had been alive, far beyond anything he could understand. He sung in the school choir, and warm candlelight had filled the space, gleaming off the brass cross on the altar and the high stained glass windows. There'd been a togetherness, something warm against the night outside that he couldn't define and missed. Would it be at the church tonight if he went, or would it be absent even there and make the season bleaker still? "That's very kind of you," he said, stilted, formal, both of them picking tentatively over the landscape as if through a minefield. He was almost certain that Julia might be interested in him that way, in the way he thought of her, almost, but not quite. And in that word there was a great gulf fixed, and when you'd been burned so many times, venturing out got harder. Your own four walls, void and cheerless as they were at least comforting and familiar. Better than someone else's home full of traps waiting to be sprung. But I'm fine. It's no trouble, Julia said, really. A part of him wanted to, the rest was too afraid to hope, and besides, her home, only a short walk away, abruptly seemed a vast and insuperable distance reached only by an effort beyond his meager physical resources. That nebulous hope was outweighed by the dread of disappointment and humiliation, and the comforts of home, devised to compensate for that lack, were suddenly irresistible in their allure. I think I'll stay in, he said at last. I'll let you know in the morning about dinner, if that's all right. It's fine, she said. Was she angry or sad, her voice dull with annoyance or muted with regret? I'll talk to you tomorrow, then. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. The phrase meant something to him, even now, with any faith he had long left behind. Back then, the shepherds and the wise men, the angels and the child, Mary and Joseph, all this had been real and true, history as integral to life as breath and bread, water, or wine. No division or separation, all one thing. Now? Only appetite, nothing else, an excuse for it, all else a gloss on the turd, a means to an arse end. The worst of it, of course, was the fear that it had never been what he remembered, had always been like this. Chris folded the phone and pocketed it, then turned back to the stereo. Neither Monteverdi nor Purcell, he decided tonight. The Baroque composers could await another day. There was a CD of Christmas carols. If he couldn't be at the church with Julia, he could at least bring the music to him and see if it stirred whatever it was that lay dormant. He put it on, let the music break the house's silence. Perhaps he was being foolish or cowardly, timid again, afraid to venture anything. He reached into his pocket, touched the phone. Perhaps he should call Julia back, tell her he changed his mind. He flicked the phone open, and the lights went out. On the stereo, I Saw Three Ships was cut off in mid-verse. Banging his shins on the furniture, Chris blundered in search of the fuse box. I can't actually pronounce that one. But then looked out of the window. He and the room were now faint ghosts in the glass. To see the darkness outside was now absolute. A couple of street lamps visible from the house had gone out, and the sky, where the clouds had burned a dull orange with reflected sodium light, was black now too. Not the fuse box, then. A power cut. He couldn't remember the last time such a thing had happened. It might have been far back in his childhood. Candles and board games, reading by candlelight. An adventure, it felt like. Flipping open the phone, he used its thin, pale glow to navigate to the kitchen, where he found candles and kitchen matches in the drawers. Once lit and anchored to plates and saucers by congealing puddles of dripped wax, the candles filled the living room with a dim, warm glow, far dimmer than the extinguished lights, but warmer. Old memories, fond ones. Chris sat in the candlelight, splashed bells into a mug, reached for a paperback. The faint candlelight pushed a little of the dark back from the window, but it flickered so that there always seemed to be movement just out of Chris's sight. He kept looking up at first, before forcing himself to concentrate on his book. He didn't know what made him look up again. Maybe he sensed on some level that the latest flicker he'd seen was something more than a dancing flame. He looked up through the window and saw the shadows outside starting to move. People filing into the close. Carol singers? But such people always missed the close. It was too well hidden, and besides, they were silent. At first he thought they had no lights with them either, but dull orange motes like coals or embers seemed to swim in the air about them. Christmas had always been the one night when, as a boy, he was free of ghosts, no monsters under the bed, in shadowed corners or the night outside, only Santa Claus and Rudolph, the Christ child, and the three wise men following their star across the desert. Ghost stories for Christmas had been pleasures, not nightmares, because that night they weren't real. Even with his childhood faith long fallen away, it felt to Chris like a violation for the for this time of the year to hold on to any kind of menace. Chris went closer to the window. The skins of those shapes in the dark looked gray, their tattered garments black. The lights, though, what were those lights? And then one of them rose right in front of him and pressed its face to the window, and Chris saw the light came from its mouth, or the ragged holes that served for them. Its hairless, noseless head was like a great clump of cigarette ash, lit from within by a still glowing ember. Its long hands spread across the glass. The candles flickered, and something else spread across the pane, a thin film of frost ice crystals forming geometric patterns on the window. As the flaming eyes fixed him, Chris saw his breath billow out white, felt a wave of bitter air, arctic icy, roll over him. The chill of it seared through to his bones, more so as more of the gray-faced shapes crowded closer to the window to stare. Chris flicked open his phone, thumbed the emergency services number into it, but there was no ring. Only that whispering static that pervaded his dialogue with Julia, now grown deafening. Even so, he thought he heard whispers in it, voices singing, before the phone went dead. The back door. Chris ran to the kitchen. He could get out through there, run across the garden, go over the wall, call for help. He pulled the cord, and the blinds that hung across the patio door drew back. 4 or 5 gray figures stood in his back garden. 2 moved closer to the doors, as if drawn by the thin candlelight. They didn't press up against the glass, stopping instead 2 or 3 feet from the doors, but the same wash of cold air blew over him as they approached. Another appeared at the kitchen window. His face was hunger and rage, irregular luminous holes for eyes, and a torn stretched howl of a glowing mouth. The song begun as he stumbled back through into the living room. The one standing before the window had taken its hands from the glass. It and the others outside began to sway gently to and fro, from side to side. The song droned on, and the chill in the room deepened. So did the sense of menace from the dull gray shapes. Chris couldn't make out the words they were singing. Their voices were too thick and blurred, too toneless for him to be certain of the tune. But he thought the melody might be a much corrupted version of a familiar carol, greatly slowed and slurred. The memories they evoked were so old and deep-rooted they were moods, ambiances, more than images or sounds, of warmth and safety, comfort and belonging. On the sofa between Mom and Dad, watching the Christmas Eve movie on television, in the church, half asleep on a hard wooden pew, while the congregation rose with rumble of clothes, clatter of shoes on wood, and the sighing of breath to sing. And all the souls on earth shall sing on Christmas Day, on Christmas Day. And all the souls on earth shall sing on Christmas Day in the morning. Then let us all rejoice, amen, on Christmas Day, on Christmas Day. Then let us all rejoice, amen, on Christmas Day in the morning. That was what those carols meant, a coming together, love and goodwill to all, worth hanging on to surely, whether you believed or not. But this song was a discord, invoking those things only to reject them, a gleeful inversion of all the carol might mean, gleeful if anything approaching glee could be connected to those yawning, yearning, craving faces of ash and dull fire. Will Julia be at the church now? The first sung notes echoing in the high ceiling. He should have gone. Why hadn't he? His reasons for not doing so seemed so trivial now. Let him get through this night unscratched, and he'd act on his feelings for her. What was the risk of a little embarrassment if he realized he misread things? Nothing he couldn't survive. The room was darkening. Colder, colder, colder the living room grew. Breath blew white from him like smoke, teeth chattering. He dragged himself to the cupboard under stairs, grabbed jackets and cardigans, a pair of gloves, and pulled them on. He went back one more time to fumble, thick-fingered, in a crate of summer items and long unused toys, where he found the string-wound handle of an old cricket bat and pulled it out. He felt the heft of it as he near-crawled back into the room. As he reached the sofa, each breath scorching his throat, the candles glowed, dwindled to yellow pinpoints. Then, one by one, the cold air pinched them out, like fingers and thumbs, leaving only wisps of smoke and the dimming embers of wicks, and the only light came from the eyes and mouths of faces pressed against the living room windows and patio doors. The glow rendered hazy, a nimbus by the spreading patterns of frost. The song droned on, the glow of the mouths and eyes pulsed, and the cold grew bitterer still. They were drawing the heat from the room, the life from his blood. After a while, the cold began to recede. He was starting to feel almost warm again. Hypothermia, he realized. He was in the church, the warm lights glowing around him, the warmth of Julia's shoulder a scant inch from him. She took his hand in hers. The choir sang Hallelujah. Julia smiled at him, warmth belonging home. His head jerked, and he was in the living room again. The cold of it bit into him. There wasn't long left, not if he wanted to do something. Something like what? Why, escape, of course. But how was that supposed to happen? They surrounded the house. They were many. He was one. And if he tried to flee and failed, what would happen to him? And how could it differ from what could happen if he stayed put? Of course, this was cozier, doing something, reaching out. Those were always harder than staying put, doing nothing. They claimed more energy, took more effort, more courage. Hadn't that been why he stayed in tonight? Instead of going to the church, he thought of Julia, her quiet, warm-eyed face, the small, well-lit house he'd only ever walked past, never seen the inside of, but now so desperately wanted to. The little church only 2 streets away, where she'd be by now. If he'd gone when she called, this wouldn't be happening. He was sure of that. They'd come for him, he was certain, because he'd been a target of opportunity, isolated, alone in the dark. So he pushed himself to his feet, leaning on the cricket bat, and wondered if these things might not be the true reason for this season after all. Was that why people gathered together on the long black nights? Why they built lights and high fires? Because they'd known that these waited in the dark for when the veils between the worlds grew thin, to seek out the stragglers, the friendless, the alone. But he had a friend, and he turned away from her. He wanted to see Julia now, wanted that more than he wanted anything. To sit on a hard wooden pew and listen through the sermons and the lessons, to listen to the choir sing and sing and sing, holding back the darkness and the cold, pulling off a glove with his teeth, fumbling in his pocket for the key to the patio doors, the song rising and falling, the key in the lock, managing to insert it on the 4th or 5th attempt. The faces crowding close, the key turned, the tumblers clicked, pushing the handle down. Go out fighting, fight and fight. On the offensive from the first second, only chance you've got. He threw himself against the door and knocked it wide. 2 of the gray things were flung backwards, light as straw. He got both hands to the cricket bat's handle and went over the threshold as the others came after him. He swung once, hard, caught one of the gray things in the head. The eyes flickered and dimmed, and it fell sideways. He swung about him, then left them right, clearing them back. Keep moving, don't stop. They had numbers. He had surprise and speed. Another came at him. He swept the bat down in an overhead blow, the edge of it hitting the crown of its skull. A crunch, and the gray thing collapsed, pile-driven to the paving stones. The others backed up, circling. Their eyes and mouths pulsed and sang, still drawing the life from him. He charged, swinging, broke through, running up the garden, hearing the whispering footfalls in pursuit, the bat in his hands, 2 charred patches bitten into either edge of it, one from each blow it struck. Ignore that. Ignore them. He had to reach the wall, then clear it. A road ran parallel to the close, just a small side street, but it led to the main road, the city, to Julia. Surely they'd give up the pursuit then. Surely creatures like these wouldn't dare to be seen so openly, or they'd long ago have been exposed and destroyed. The top of the wall was flat. He heaved the bat onto it and clambered up. As he did, he saw they almost reached the wall, saw too, dismayingly, that the 2 he felled had risen to their feet and joined the pursuit. Chris heaved himself on top of the wall as the first of the greys began to climb, hands and feet sticking to the brickwork. A lizard up the wall, or a spider. He grabbed the bat and struck down at its head, but lizard quick. It Its hand came free from the wall, flew up and grabbed the bat. The wood smoldered and blackened, the dark stains spreading out from around where the gray held it, then split and broke up, falling into ashes and char. The blackness crept down the handle, but instead of heat, it was cold that seared Chris's palm. He shouted at the pain, recoiled, and with another louder cry, he tipped back over the wall. He landed on the bushes below, stripped bare by winter and turned hard and brittle by the cold. The branches speared him in a dozen places. One gouged his cheek, missing his eye by an inch, but they broke his fall and not his bones. He scrambled to his feet, clothes torn, feeling blood run down his legs and arm and face, but feeling was returning. This cold was an honest winter's chill. Fumbling above him, a gray hand groped over the wall, the top of a head, two dully glowing orange blobs. He broke into as much of a run as he could manage. He didn't have to get far, just to the end of the street, and there'd be the city. There'd be people, but it was so quiet. When he rounded the corner, he knew at once that something was wrong, but couldn't tell what. The sea was dark, after all, but wouldn't it be? There was a power cut. From behind there came soft, heavy thumps, his pursuers coming over the wall. He broke into a limping run again, and as he did, the sea became more clearly visible. The buildings weren't just dark, but also empty. Shattered windows ringed with soot, yawning doors, dust hardened into petrified mud on curbs and pavements, wires of winter-blackened weed. Abandoned, and not recently. And while they bore passing resemblance to the buildings he passed every day, they were not the same. He was on their side of the mirror, not his own. He realized that just as the song began again behind him. The cold gripped him immediately. He could almost see the warmth billowing out of his back in golden clouds to be sucked into those ravaging faces. His vision blurred. He had seen a light burning somewhere in the distance. Was it too late now to reach out? Please, let it not be too late. As the song grew louder, he began running again. He stumbled blindly towards where he hoped the light might be, hoping he might find it, and perhaps others like him, before his pursuers reached him. So, Merry Christmas. Christmas tree. Yay. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.